I will now tell you a real story from the Middle Ages. This is the story of a man who truly lived and is considered by many historians to be one of the greatest knights of the medieval world. His name was William Marshal. This story is not only about a warrior, it is also a story about loyalty, patience, and the power a person has to change their own destiny. In the middle of the 12th century, England was passing through a dangerous and complicated time. Kings changed, barons rebelled, castles were besieged, and the country seemed to live in almost constant war. At the heart of this chaos was a long civil conflict that historians call the Anarchy. The country was divided between rival rulers, loyalties were broken, and trust had nearly disappeared. William Marshal was born into this world of uncertainty and conflict. His father was a minor nobleman. He did not own vast lands or enormous wealth, but he was a hardened warrior who spent much of his life defending castles and fighting in local conflicts. Life for many nobles in the Middle Ages was rarely peaceful. Instead of quiet years of prosperity, they often lived through sieges, raids, and political struggles. When William was still a small child, an event occurred that showed just how brutal this world could be. His father was trapped inside a castle during a siege. The enemy commander made a terrible offer. If the castle did not surrender, he would kill the young boy they held hostage. That boy was William. Taking hostages was a common practice in medieval politics. Noble children were often kept by rival lords as guarantees that agreements would be honored, but those hostages were not always safe. As young William waited in the enemy camp, the defenders inside the castle had to make a decision. Should they surrender or continue fighting? William's father refused to surrender. According to medieval chronicles, when the enemy threatened the child, his father answered with chilling words, "I still have the hammer and anvil to make better sons." Today those words sound cruel and shocking, but the medieval world was a place where strategy and survival often stood above personal feelings. William came very close to death that day. Some stories even say the enemy soldiers considered launching him from a catapult toward the castle wall. But in the end, political circumstances changed and the boy was released unharmed. William survived, but the memory of that moment stayed with him for the rest of his life. As he grew older, William was sent to the household of another noble lord to begin his training. In the medieval world, young boys who wished to become knights rarely stayed with their families. Instead, they served another lord and learned the skills of warfare and courtly life. The early years were not glorious. William carried weapons for his superiors. He cleaned armor and maintained equipment. He worked in the stables caring for horses. He obeyed every command given by older knights. But this humble service was actually part of the long preparation to become a knight. During these years, young warriors learned the difficult arts of medieval combat. They trained to fight on horseback. They learned how to wield a sword. They practiced charging with a lance. And they learned how to endure hours of battle inside heavy iron armor. Yet in the Middle Ages, a knight's greatest test was often not war, it was the tournament. Today, tournaments may sound like harmless competitions, but in the medieval world, they were extremely dangerous. Hundreds of armored knights would gather in large fields and fight mock battles that were sometimes almost as violent as real war. Men were injured, sometimes they died, but the rewards were great. A knight who captured an opponent during a tournament could demand a ransom for his release. For skilled fighters, tournaments could bring both fame and wealth. William Marshal proved to be extraordinary in these contests. Again and again, he defeated rival knights and captured them. Before long, his name was known across much of Europe. Chroniclers began writing about him with admiration and fear. One account famously said, "There is no knight more dangerous in the tournament field than William Marshal." These successes eventually attracted the attention of the English king, Henry II of England. Henry II ruled a powerful realm, but his family life was full of tension and rivalry. The king decided that William Marshal would become the protector and mentor of his son. This prince was known in history as Henry the Young King. The young prince had already been crowned king during his father's lifetime. However, the real power remained in the hands of Henry II. This strange arrangement soon created deep frustration. Eventually, the young king rebelled against his father. Suddenly, William Marshal found himself caught in the middle of a royal conflict. The oath he had sworn bound him to the young king, so he fought on the prince's side. England once again fell into chaos as father and son faced each other in war. In one famous encounter, William Marshal reportedly attacked the king himself during battle, yet at the last moment he chose not to kill him. Instead, he killed the king's horse and withdrew. William understood that killing a king could bring terrible consequences. Years later, the young king became gravely ill. Most historians believe he suffered from dysentery. As he lay dying, he called William Marshal to his side. He asked him to perform one final duty. "I wish to go to Jerusalem, but I never could. Go there in my place." At that time, these words carried enormous meaning. Much of Europe was involved in the long religious conflicts known as the Crusades. Traveling to the Holy Land was seen as both a sacred pilgrimage and an act of honor. William Marshal kept his promise. He traveled east and spent time in the lands connected to Jerusalem. When he eventually returned to England, he was no longer simply a skilled warrior. He had become a respected and experienced knight whose reputation was known across the kingdom. In the later years of his life, he served one of the most controversial rulers in English history, King John of England. King John's reign was troubled. Heavy taxes, military failures, and political disputes pushed many English barons into rebellion. The tension finally led to one of the most important documents in political history. In 1215, the king was forced to accept the charter known as Magna Carta. This agreement limited the power of the monarch and established important legal protections. William Marshal played a role in maintaining balance between the crown and the rebellious barons during this fragile time. Yet the most extraordinary moment of his life was still ahead. In 1216, England again fell into war. A French prince, Louis VIII of France, invaded the country and attempted to claim the English throne. At that moment, England's king was the young Henry III of England. He was only 9 years old. The true leadership of the kingdom rested in the hands of William Marshal, and by this time he was around 70 years old. In the Middle Ages, that age was considered extremely old. Most knights would have long retired from warfare. But William Marshal did something extraordinary. He put on his armor, he mounted his horse, and he rode to war once more. In 1217, a decisive battle took place that would shape the future of England. It was the Battle of Lincoln, 1217. William Marshal personally commanded the royal army. His forces launched a sudden attack into the city and overwhelmed the French and rebel troops. The victory was decisive. The invading army collapsed, and the French attempt to seize the English crown soon failed. Many historians believe that if this battle had been lost, England might have fallen under French control. William Marshal's leadership saved the kingdom. After the war, his reputation reached legendary status. He had served 5 different English kings. He had fought in countless battles. He had won many tournaments. And even in old age, he had led armies to victory. In 1219, William Marshal felt that the end of his life was approaching. He withdrew from worldly power and entered a religious house. His final wish was to be buried as a knight of the Templar Order. Today, his tomb can still be seen inside Temple Church in London. His stone effigy lies there, a knight carved in armor, a sword at his side, hands resting calmly as if in prayer. Yet his face seems to look forward, as if still watching a battlefield beyond time. For many historians, William Marshal represents the ideal image of a medieval knight, not only because of his strength in battle, but because of his loyalty, discipline, and long service to his kingdom. Perhaps that is why his story is still told centuries later, because sometimes, in the long history of the world, there appear people whose determination is as strong as iron, and their stories slowly pass from history into legend